different colonial powers have done throughout history. They always dehumanize a group before they kill them or before they enslave them or cut off their resources. You've seen that with Arabs, Muslims, Persians. The mainstream media, it's acceptable to call them racial slings and terms, but nobody else, because that's the current group they want to wage war on. But also in the internal Homeland Security documents that we've gotten over the years, it's all about landowners and independent groups now, liberal, conservative, constitutionalist, anybody who wants to be left alone. Amish. These groups are all being targeted now because, as Russell Means pointed out 6 months ago or so in that special report we put out, welcome to the reservation. This model, this global gulag model, is what we're facing. And he's really an expert on Native American activist issues and one of the best known people out there. He's an author, poet, actor, musician, John Trudell. And he joins us on the anniversary of the Wounded Knee Massacre to break it down in context of what's happening today. And also on screen, we'll have his website for you if you want to learn more about this complex individual. John, thanks for coming on with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I mean, you heard my introduction, but where should we start with what's happening in the world today and tying it back to what happened at Wounded Knee?
Well, I think Wounded Knee is being replayed in the world today. It's just being replayed. The behavioral energy pattern of I call them the industrial ruling class. I think it's beyond capitalism and socialism and communism. To me, it's an industrial ruling class, and all these isms serve the needs of this industrial ruling class. And I think that the behavior pattern of this, historically speaking, of this industrial ruling class never really changes. What changes is the technology, the terminology, and the generations. So for the Wounded Knee Massacre, I think that forms of that massacre are taking place now today, but it's now the American citizenry, and the forms of the massacre now are more like psychological. I mean, this whole thing with the economic manipulation and the authoritarian emergence of the Patriot Act and all of these various mechanisms, controlling mechanisms, I think that they're psychologically massacring the American citizens mentally.
I agree with you. I mean, now the Bluecoats aren't coming after the Apache. They're coming after everybody with the NDAA, all these admissions that citizens will disappear into nowhere. I mean, this military-industrial complex is a predatory, cannibalistic system.
There's an industrial ruling class. The military-industrial complex, is a terminology that has emerged within our generation. But this military-industrial complex serves the industrial ruling class. The industrial ruling class is basically probably that 1% to 2% that control all the resources, and they, they basically remain hidden behind all of these other labels, whether it's the industrial ruling class or it's capitalism or communism or any of these things. And their plan, is to consume. It's to consume. It's like, in a way, because everything is about energy. Everything is about energy. And everything that goes on in this dimensional reality is about energy. And what this industrial ruling class is they're consuming the energy of the human beings. And they turn the human beings into citizens through their mining processes of their educational systems, their religious systems, their patriotic systems, their military systems, their economic systems. To me, these are all mining mechanisms, mine the energy of the human being. And so what I see going on now is, it's like the Dark Ages. If you go and look at medieval Europe, back in the Dark Ages, the energy pattern, the behavior pattern is the same now as it was then. It's just that the technology and the terminology. So however we're going to deal with this, we need to really start, I think, using our creative intelligence to see what's really going on beyond the emotional fears and paranoid perceptions of reality that they've imprinted us with.
Well, John, a few months ago, I was somewhat aware of your work, but one of my producers wanted to get you on, and I said, well, give me time because I want to be able to research and really find out what he's into. And now that I've looked at what you do more, I admire a lot of it because that's what you're doing, is you're trying to shift paradigms away from all the terms that they give us, the maps of the mind that they make, to look at it from a fresh perspective. Because from my own research, that's the only way to ever break free from this, is that the system has created all these different variants that it still controls, and that's why it's so hard to get out of it. And when you read the top globalist ruling class documents, you know, they say the same thing you say, but in different words. They want to return us to the Dark Ages, to feudalism. They use poverty as a tool of control. People say, oh, the politicians are idiots. They can't fix it. They don't want to fix it. They're just front men for people who want to control us and want to, as you said, totally steal our psyches and turn us into some type of zombies, basically.
Well, you know, everything that ever happens, it has to manifest through our intelligence, our perception of reality, our creative mind. And what this industrial ruling class, industrial civilization thing seems to do is it imprints, you know, from as soon as we're born, we start getting imprinted with their perception of reality. And their perception of reality is basically a fear-based perception. You know, we're guilty for being born, sin, blame, all that stuff. You know, and so that we're imprinted to believe from the beginning that there's something wrong with us. And this imprinting, as we go through our lives, this imprinting just continues to manifest. It's as basic as, you know, the original sin, so there's something wrong with us. Or all of the advertising and commercials that go on, they're basically psychologically telling us we're not good enough. The whole thing is an issue or something with us. So we don't trust ourselves. And this is kind of like them taking the being part of human and turning it into an energy that they can consume and use it to run their system. So we're programmed to perceive reality based upon believing. We're not taught to perceive reality from the view of thinking. And then and everything's about energy. So we can either think or we can believe, but we can't do both at the same time. It's one or the other. Because thinking represents energy flowing. It's flowing into the infinite, so it's evolving. Believing represents energy taken and put this energy into a container. The energy of thinking put into a container. Because all beliefs are prejudiced and biased. They're limited. They're not objective. That when we take the energy of thinking and we put it in a container of I believe this, I believe that, that means I'm not thinking. It means, because once I believe, I don't have to think anymore because it's just there automatic. So we're programmed to believe what we're programmed to believe. And the most basic part of that programming of to believe has got to do is that there's something wrong with us. See, once we believe that, now they got us. See, they can manipulate anything. And so once we're programmed to believe that there's something wrong with us as human beings, as individuals, then after that, they plant the emotional buttons based upon those fears of something's wrong with us. And then every time they want to control us, they push an emotional button. And then our thinking, our creative intelligence goes off into this chaos. And it's generally, we've been wired in such a way to use the power of our creative intelligence against ourselves through these beliefs that are based upon fears of self and self-worth.
All right, expanding on that, there is a crisis in the social engineers themselves that I've been noticing develop and intensify. They know that they're losing control at many levels, and the same systems they've used to dumb down the population are now basically backwashing or blowing back on them. And I see all these moves for oppression of free speech, militarization, trying to start new wars as desperate thrashing. I mean, do you concur with that, or do you disagree, or what can you add? Because everybody I talk to seems to come to the same conclusion, or at least similar, that we're coming towards a quickening, a crisis, and for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. That the world and humanity is in an extreme crossroads right now.
I think that maybe they do have it under control, because, you know, the way this energy mining process, because it's all about energy, and the way this whole energy mining process goes is what it's, to me, it's like they anticipate, they know that there's going to be public rebellion. This is out of desperation, there'll be public rebellion. But everybody's, but I think where they have it, where they feel that they have it under control, is everybody's been imprinted by the same belief systems. See, no one's really thinking outside of it. Because, see, the protest is energy. It's a system designed to absorb energy. So if we protest, it absorbs the energy of that protest. Whether we do it violently or non-violently, it absorbs the energy of that protest. Because the 60s shows me as an example, our generation, we were out there and we did it all. We fed our energy to them, but somehow they absorbed it. And the situation changed, all right, by getting worse. It didn't get better. The war is more, they're more lethal, they're more deadly, they're internment camp, this whole stuff, that this police state thing that they're setting up. All right. So somehow, to me, even when we seemed to be, when it appeared to us we were out of control, they controlled us. They absorbed the energy. And the closest I can come to it is because, see, we're reacting to how they programmed us to believe. We're not really clearly thinking on our own. And you know, it's like, it's about energy. Something I'd like to say, you know, because if we go out and violently protest or non-violently protest, it appears to me they absorb that energy. So maybe it's really an issue, how do we confront this situation without allowing it to absorb our energy?
Okay, I want to hear then your ideas of how to respond to them, but I agree with what you're saying. It's a very sophisticated issue, but to try to boil it down, they know that there's going to be an awakening to the corruption in sectors of Wall Street. So they have George Soros, who controls the left wing of the control paradigm, and the Democratic Party come out on record and announce, come out and demonstrate against corruption. They make it very general, real people show up, then they take control of it to play the part of controlled left so the controlled right can then attack it, and so they can then demonize the groups. It turned out Homeland Security ran it nationwide. They had the prisoners released from jail and mentally ill and others to send them down to the demonstrations to then say, oh, look, they're a bunch of, you know, crazy people, to then demonize everybody. It was all scientifically done. And then they used that as a pretext to then try to basically brand all opposition one way. And they did get power and energy out of it. So when you're dealing with something that sophisticated, who knows how to take control of things, how to misbrand them, how to label them, how to, you know, do all of this, how do you counter something like that that's scientifically already thought 10 steps ahead because it is so cold-blooded and doesn't have any basic love or humanity?
I think we think differently. We think more.